Hey Kairos family, happy Friday. It is May 22nd. Wow, it is already almost the end of the month. How crazy is that? That's insane. This is Memorial Day weekend, so if you guys were in school, you probably would have a 3-day weekend. I don't know, do you guys still have a 3-day weekend, or does it not really matter right now? Some of you guys are out of school. That's exciting. Hi Emily, hi Lauren, hi Joel, hi Bo, hi Abby. Let me make sure that I didn't miss anyone. Yeah, so far we're good. Yes, Emily, I see you commented yep. Does that mean that you don't have school on Monday or today? I don't know, whichever day you normally have off. I think it's normally Monday. But cool. Well, I hope that you guys have an awesome weekend. I don't know what you guys can do. We can't go to the beach. Hi, Mom. 3-day weekend. That's exciting. Very fun. Very fun. I don't have any 3-day weekend plans. I think this is the weekend that my parents were supposed to be in California. Is that right, Mom? But they postponed their trip to a later date, which is fine. All right. Today's gonna be an interesting day because this story is really interesting. So, the question that we're going over today in our biblical literacy test is question number 3, which is, who is Eutychus? And I could be completely butchering this name. I don't know. I've never met anyone named Eutychus, so I don't know. Hey Rhett, welcome. Oh, Mom, I'm sad you can't be here too, but it's okay. Alright, so who is Eutychus? The answers are, number 1, a fallen angel mentioned in Genesis 6. Number 2, a Stoic philosopher that Paul debates at the Areopagus. 3, a man who fell asleep listening to Paul preach. Or number 4, the second cousin of Judas. If you think you know the answer, you can type it in the chat room. Hi Aiden, welcome, I'm glad you're here. So we will find the answer in Acts chapter 20. Chapter 20, and we're going to start in verse 7 today. And this story is really, really interesting. To be honest, when I first took this test, I had no idea who Eutychus was. I don't even remember which one I answered, but I know I got it wrong because I was like, that seems weird. The actual answer seems weird. Huh, yes, Emily, it's the dude who fell asleep. I was like, someone fell asleep while listening to Paul preach? That's weird. That can't be right. No one would fall asleep when someone's preaching, right? No one would do that. But yeah, no, Eutychus did. So, let's start in chapter 20, verse 7 of the book of Acts. It says, on the first day of the week, we gathered with the local believers to share the Lord's Supper. Paul was preaching to them, and since he was leaving the next day, he kept talking until midnight. Can you guys imagine if Pastor Josh talked till midnight? I mean, I love his preaching, but I think I understand what Eutychus was going through. I can't listen to anyone talk that long. So we kept talking until midnight. The upstairs room where we met was lighted with many flickering lamps. As Paul spoke on and on, a young man named Eutychus, sitting on the windowsill, became very drowsy. Finally, he fell sound asleep and dropped 3 stories to his death below. What? Oh my gosh, this story is so weird. But it continues in verse 10. It says, Paul went down, bent over him, took him into his arms. Don't worry, he said. He's alive. Verse 11. Then they all went back upstairs, shared in the Lord's Supper, and ate together. Paul continued talking to them until dawn, and then he left. Meanwhile, the young man was taken home unhurt, and everyone was greatly relieved. So weird. So weird. This is one of those stories that I read through, and then I started looking up a bunch of stuff, like, okay, tell me more about this dude. There's so, like, this is it. This is all we get. And it's just so weird, because it's like, okay, like, how do we apply? Yes, Emily, he came back to life? Yes. So, upon further research, so let's dive into a couple things. Some fun facts that I found while digging into who the heck this Eutychus guy is. So, the name Eutychus actually means good fortune. Kind of ironic, considering he fell from a 3-story window. That's like if you were to fall off our roof at church. That's about 3 stories. So if you were to fall off our roof at church, I don't think that you have good fortune if you fall off our roof at church. But I guess he did have fortune because he was brought back to life, so there's that. So the name Eutychus means good fortune. Also, so they used the phrase young man in reference to Eutychus. So we don't have a specific age, but in this time period, they would refer to people as young man if you were between the ages of 8 years old and 14 years old. So chances are Eutychus could have been your age, somewhere in that range. So he was a young man. He could have been someone that people, he was sitting on a windowsill, 3 stories. High chance of falling if you don't have glass to keep you in. So chances are, because he was so young, he had a mentality of like, oh, nothing bad can happen to me. I'm invincible. I'm going to sit on this ledge. And then something bad happened. He fell asleep and he fell down. Imagine climbing up into a tree and trying to sleep there. Like, this is how I feel when I watch The Hunger Games and Katniss is sleeping in the tree. No, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't trust myself. I wouldn't trust myself to fall asleep and not just like immediately fall over. I like to sleep laying down in a formation where I won't fall and hurt myself. So let's see, where were they? So, Eutychus is a young man, and he fell out of a window. So then let's look at Paul. So, I think this is so weird. It's just, I just want to reread this again. As Paul spoke on and on, which is funny in itself, because to have 2 ons, it's just like, you can kind of feel like the tiredness in the author. She's like, he just spoke on and on. It's kind of funny. So a young man named Eutychus, sitting on a windowsill, became very drowsy. Finally, he fell sound asleep and dropped 3 stories to his death below. Guys, there are moments where you will read the Bible and just start laughing aloud to yourself. This is one of those stories that I just cracked up to myself. Just so weird. So let's look at Paul's response in verse 10. Paul went down, bent over him, and took him into his arms. So, so this is, what translation is this? This is the New Living Translation. In another translation, it uses the phrase, he threw himself on him, which in Greek is the word, I'm going to butcher this, epipsen, E-P-I-P-S-E-N, which is translated, he threw himself on him. So this phrase or this word, it implies a loss of dignity. And the other passage that we see this in is Luke 15, which, if you are familiar with, is the prodigal son. It's where we see a story of a father who loves his son so much that when his son comes up to him and asks for his share of the inheritance prior to the dad being dead, because remember, inheritance is something that you inherit after a parent passes, but this son came up to his dad and asked for his inheritance before, and which is basically saying, like, Dad, I wish you were dead, give me your money. So he gives the son the money. The son spends all his money on just useless things, and then he is completely broke. So he then discovers, like, oh, my hired servants get treated pretty well. Like, it got to the point where he was sleeping and eating from pigs' troughs. Gross. Pigs are disgusting animals. So he's eating and sleeping with the pigs, and he realizes that his father's hired servants are better off than he is. So he intends to go home and become a servant. But when his dad sees him from a long way off, he hikes up his skirt, which is seen as losing your dignity. You do not run as an elderly man in that culture, and you definitely don't hike up your skirt, because remember, they didn't really have jeans like we have. So he hiked up his and started running. And this is the same word that's used when he embraced his son. To throw himself on, to lose your dignity and just embrace him. So this is the phrase that we see being used with this boy Eutychus. When he falls out of the window, Paul throws himself on him, and he takes this boy in his arms. And if you can imagine, actually don't imagine this, but because it's gruesome, but someone that falls from 3 stories high, they probably don't look very pretty. I'm sure that you guys have seen in movies people falling from buildings. Most of the time, they probably land weird and they have broken bones. Something that I would not want to run over and embrace immediately. So we see Paul do this. We see Paul run over to this boy who fell out of this window, and he's dead. But he doesn't relish in that, because remember, he's been gifted. And he says, don't worry, he is alive. That would be my first worry, is that he's not alive. That would be my first worry. So it's interesting that he says, don't worry, he's alive. But then they don't dwell on that. They don't dwell on the fact that he fell. They don't dwell on the fact that he fell asleep, which caused him to fall out of the window. They just kind of move on. They move on, and it says in verse 11, they all went back upstairs and shared in the Lord's Supper and ate together. And that was the whole reason they were there, was to partake in the Lord's Supper together, which is communion. So Paul continued talking to them until dawn, and then he left. Verse 12, meanwhile, the young man was taken home unhurt and greatly relieved. And everyone was greatly relieved. I imagine that he himself was also greatly relieved, but everyone was greatly relieved. So we see Paul doing something here. We see Paul extending grace towards this boy. We see this idea of that it's more important to find life and to give life to the youth that fell out of the window than finding fault in him. Because it could be really easy in that moment, once he healed him, it could have been really easy for him to be like, what the heck are you doing? Why did you fall asleep? Do you not love Jesus? Do you not want to hear his words? But no, they did not linger over questions of fault and why he did that and how wrong it was that he fell asleep. But they lingered over bringing life to him and rejoicing in the fact that he's okay. So do not worry, he's alive. He was given new life. So something that we can learn from this, besides the importance of not falling asleep during church, especially if you decide to perch yourself on a windowsill that doesn't have a window pane blocking you from falling 3 stories to your doom, besides that, I think that we can take from this the idea of speaking life to people, bringing life to people rather than pointing out their faults. Because I guarantee you that Eutychus, when he was brought to life, like, he knew that he messed up. But instead of focusing on that, Paul extended him grace. And then they were able to continue on with the reason why they were there, and they broke bread immediately after. Like, can you imagine if you died and were brought back to life and the first thing you did was communion? Like, that's one of the coolest things. I think Eutychus probably had his life changed from that. He was given new life, and he started his new life immediately communing with others and with God. So I want to challenge you guys that if you find yourself in a situation where you could point out the flaws in other people or even yourself, or you can extend grace and bring life to yourself and to others, choose that. Choose to bring life and light to others. Because I think that's how we're going to change the world and make it a better place, rather than pointing out the negativity and the things that we all know that we could do better. But bringing out the life and positivity in people. Again, weird story. Bible is full of these weird stories. So that's question number 3 for you guys. So who is Eutychus? He is the dude that fell asleep while Paul was preaching. So don't be like Eutychus. Be like Paul and bring life to others, even when they fall asleep during your sermons. It's Friday, so tomorrow we will not be having a devotional, but we will be having drive-in church on Sunday. So I hope to see you guys all in your cars. I'll be outside walking around wearing my mask, and I'll be back here on Monday with question number 4. And I'm still planning on doing a devotional, even though it is technically a holiday. I'll still be here, and it will be posted to the Instagram TV. So if you don't want to be on social media and you want to use that holiday as a Sabbath, please feel free to do that. As I know, I've talked to you guys about this, Sabbaths are so important, so make sure you keep one. But I love you guys, and I hope that you enjoyed today's odd lesson, and I will see you guys on Monday for, I think, not such an odd lesson. So have a great weekend, guys. See you guys later.